Hello, book fighters. It's Sunday. So it's been a while, and I apologize for that. For those of you who don't know, which I think is probably most of you, in this time where I didn't have videos, I've moved 2 times, and during those, there were quite a few days where I didn't even have internet, and then I also started a new job where I had to memorize a 17-page script. And for point of reference, that's the equivalent of having to memorize 14 Vlogbrothers Thoughts from Places videos, word for word. So it was quite the challenge. So the videos, I couldn't make happen, but I did keep up with the reading, and I read Cut by a lady whose name I can't remember, but I'll put it in the description. I also read Zombicorns by John Green, and The Long Walk by Stephen King. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about Cut and Zombicorns because I read them mostly because they were really short and I knew I could get through them, and Cut I've actually read before. Zombicorns is good, it's entertaining, it's definitely one you should read if you are a John Green fan, which I know are all of us, and probably most of you have already read it. It was an interesting take on the zombie genre, but I don't really care for zombie novels all that much. I'm a huge fan of zombie movies, not so much zombie novels. I think it's the one thing that comes across much better in a visual medium than in books. You just can't get the same feel to them, I think, in novels as you can in movies. And there's not many things that I would say that about, but definitely zombies are one of them. Cut is a young adult novel, and it's about a girl who self-injures and ends up in a treatment center because of it. And I used to really like it a few years ago, but this time when I was reading it, it seemed kind of pretentious. Like, not that the main character was, but just the way it was written. It was just like, look at me make this person better, instead of being about, like, the experience. I don't know, I just didn't like it as much the second time around, but I did really like it in 2006, I think was when I first read it, so I don't know, maybe it's just I'm not in a place where I can enjoy that kind of book anymore. It's worth a read, it's still a good book, but I don't love it as much as I remember loving it. Then The Long Walk. That's a cheerful story, isn't it? Yeah, I know that Dan assigned it to Lauren, and I haven't gotten to the book that Julia's assigned to me yet because my Barnes & Nobles didn't have it, and then it was just too long for me to be able to get it in a week, so I haven't read that one yet, but I will. But The Long Walk I read because Dan has mentioned it several times over the course of this project, and so I was like, well, if Dan likes it this much, it's probably good, but it could be one of those weird Dan things that it isn't good, and I would have to make fun of him for, like, the Human Centipede fiasco, or the book that he assigned me, Ode to Kirihito. It could have been disastrous. But this one I actually really enjoyed. It reminded me a lot of The Hunger Games, like a lot of The Hunger Games. I think it's a lot of kind of similar experiences as you got in The Hunger Games, despite the setup of it being reasonably different. It dealt with kind of a lot of the same issues that those books did. So if you liked those ones, you'll probably like The Long Walk as well. But at the same time, it was very different. So when you're reading The Long Walk, the whole time you're like, how did a culture develop so that this game could be taking place, The Long Walk could be happening, and you want to know why, or I did anyway when I was reading it. But I think that this one is just focusing much more on the experiences of the people in The Long Walk. And for those of you who haven't read it, I should probably set up the premise of it, is that I guess it's a yearly thing, but 100 boys get put into The Long Walk, which is they just walk. They just keep walking until they can't anymore, and when they stumble enough times or fall behind enough times, then they get a bullet to the head, and the last man standing wins, and he wins the ultimate prize. And And so when I was reading it, I was really concerned with why is this happening? How has this been allowed to happen? And you don't really get any answers to that question. Not for me anyway. I didn't find any satisfying answers to that question. But I think that's because that wasn't the focus of the novel. It was about the things that the boys were thinking and talking about, and just the experience of the walk itself, not the culture that created it. Whereas the Hunger Games was very much about the society, the world that created the Hunger Games, and what those meant for the people on a more of a macrocosmic scale. Whereas the Long Walk is about the people participating, and that's it. It was definitely a very interesting read. It was a very long book. Very long. I would read for hours and hours and be like, how is there still so much of this book left? But you stay with the characters pretty much every minute of the walk. And I think what makes it to where you have to keep reading, because it could easily be a very boring book, but what makes it so that you have to keep reading it is that you have to know why. Like, you keep wondering, like, why is everything happening? Why is this happening to these people? What led them to voluntarily sign up for this thing that they know that they're probably not going to win? The odds are totally against them. Like, what could bring them to that point? So you want to know the answers to this, and you want to know who's gonna win. So you have your main character, and just simple book logic tells you that he's either gonna win or make it all the way, like, as close to the end as you could. It just sort of depends on how the author wants to spin it. And I'm not going to tell you which way it goes, because that question is what makes it so that you can get through this book. Like, you keep wondering. Because it's written in third person, and it's like, I don't have it with me because it's still in one of the boxes that I haven't unpacked. But the thing about it is that you really believe that the main character could die. Like, he could die, he could lose easily. It just depends on which way the ultimate conclusion of the story was going to be. He could either win or lose, and there was equal chance of it, and you have to know. Like, when you're reading it, you have to know. Does he win? Does he make it? Does he make it to the town where his family is going to be waiting for him? Does he make it all the way to the end? Like, you have to know, so you have to keep reading, even though sometimes you're just like, when will this book end? But it was good. It was a great book. I would absolutely recommend it. It was one of the better ones that I have read over the course of this project. It was a little bit old hat for me, personally, but that's not a commentary on the book. Like, the themes of it and the story itself is still relevant. The story is not stale or anything. I think just for me, I've already read so many books that have to do with the questions that it was asking, and I've already sort of gone there and thought complexly about all of these different questions that it was raising, that it didn't really bring up any new information for me. Which, again, it's not because the story isn't new or isn't still fresh. It's just, for me personally, I've already thought about these things. So it wasn't a new story for me. I've had a few books over the course of this project that were like that, where it's like, this is really good if you've never thought about these things, but I have, so it's just sort of like, I think that if I had read it in 2007, it would have been one of my favorite books. But unfortunately, just in the order that I've read books, came a little too late. But I'm glad that I read it, and I can see why Dan loves it so much, and I would definitely recommend it to anybody else. If you're thinking about reading it, you definitely should. Questions? I haven't actually watched all of the videos that happened while I wasn't able to make videos. I watched enough of them, but I haven't seen any of the most recent ones, so I don't know if anyone's asked a question lately. So if I miss them, I'll answer them in the next video, because I haven't even watched those videos yet. But first, to answer Dan's note in his description, I did read it. I did read the note, and I'm looking forward to the song. You might have already posted it, but I haven't seen it if you have, but you might not have. We already know the situation. Why am I continuing with this hypothetical? The point is, I read your note. Then Lauren asked the question if a book has ever made me cry. And you guys should probably already know the answer is no, no, No. I've never had a book or movie or TV show that's made me cry. And it's not because I haven't been emotionally moved by these things. It's just that I'm not a crier. I'm not a crier. I'm like the opposite of Dan in this respect. If there's something to be cried at, I probably won't do it. I don't cry a lot with life situations either. Like, it takes a particular blend of emotions before I'm brought to tears. And usually I only cry if I'm really frustrated or really angry. So something that's really sad isn't going to make me cry, because that's just not how I react to sadness. But, no, a book has never made me cry. So, my question for you kind of has to do with what I was saying about Zombicorns earlier. Is there anything that is done in both books and movies that you feel is done better in movies? Because I know we're all book people, and we all pretty much always feel like the books are the superior medium, and if a book is made into a movie, usually the book is better, because, you know, we're book people. But has there ever been a movie that was made from a book that you feel like the movie was better? Or are there particular story elements that you think are better in movies than in books? Yeah, that's my question. Is there anything that's better in a movie than better in a book that is seen in both of them? Obviously, like I said before, zombies play much better in movies than they do in books. I think that the movie Fight Club is better than the book Fight Club. And I feel like that there were a couple more movies that I felt were better than the books they were based on, but I can't really remember what they are right at this moment. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's possible. Next week I will be reading Lockpick Pornography by Joey Camo. I think that it's the only one of his books that I haven't read so far for this project, with the exception of his newest book, The Girl Who Couldn't Come, which I may or may not read. I know that it's full of dirty stories. I mean, I'm going to read it. I just don't know if I'll read it for this or not. But I haven't gotten that one yet because it's brand new. Okay, that's all I have for you for this video. Dan, I will see you tomorrow.